Hey guys, welcome to another episode of TopoRanger. My name is Brett, and I'm going to be your host today. As you can see, we're at the Susquehanna River here. We're in Lancaster County. That's Riverfront Park. Now, I just shot an episode here just a couple days ago, and part of that episode was I was trying to find some Masonic inscriptions, some Masonic rock art that is located right along this outcrop here. So I didn't actually find the inscriptions that day. I was kind of disappointed because I thought it would be pretty easy. So when I went back that evening, I went back online and I looked at some more pictures of where I could kind of figure out where it was, and I realized that while filming that episode, I in fact had not only been very close to the inscriptions, I actually stepped on them and walked right over them without even seeing them. I think the reason for that was the position of the sun. The sun was 12:30. It was shining right down. Thus, it wasn't there was any kind of inscriptions in the rock. The shadows would be minimized. So I'm pretty sure that's why I missed it. So in that episode, I started from the river. I came down here. I followed the same track today. Came across this rocky expanse up to this big outcrop of the phyllite, or the phyllite. And then I went down here, across here, and I went the whole way out there, and I filmed the episode. And I also looked in this entire area right here. Now, I was pretty sure, based upon looking at the photographs of the inscriptions, that it was on a boulder of diabase, which is basically this granite, and that this granite boulder was not native to this spot right here, which is phyllite. So it must have washed down from further upriver where the diabase outcrops. And I was actually correct. When I came back here today, I came right back to this spot, boom, 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 and I could actually see the inscriptions before even stepping onto the boulder. This is the route I took when I was here, right down there. I remember very clearly standing right here, right here, looking down, because I have known about this boulder. It's a rather large piece of the diabase. I've known about this. I had been here before. There's a cool little cave under there, and I looked right at it, and I didn't see anything. But as you can see right now, it's very apparent now that the sun is not directly overhead. This is the arch. I can see it without even putting anything wet on it. Here's the numbers. Here's the S. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go over a little bit about the history of the ferry that was here, and also what this inscription, what people think that this inscription is, and how it relates to Freemasonry. So I'm pretty sure you guys can see this just the way it is now, although you can't quite make out all of the elements very well. You can see that there is an inscription right here. I'm going to try to wet it down a little bit and see if we can make it pop. So I got a washcloth here with some water. Now I'm going to swipe it and see if that helps make it pop. Let's do the numbers first. There they are. There's the number C82130. There's also an S right there. Now the arch itself is right here. So let's go ahead and wet that. And there it is. Here's the arch. In the middle are the numbers 2 and the fraction 1/2. And then underneath, LOL. So if you go back to 1719, there was a parcel in this area of 500 acres that was owned by a guy named James Latorte. Now, he was a trader. He traded with the Indians. Probably was a fur trader as well. These were very well known historically in around these parts here. He also had a cabin here, right in this area where he lived, and he also had a trading post with his partners, Peter Bazillion and Moses Combs. So that's how this land really started out, and that was back in the early 1700s. At some point, the land was sold to a Christian Winnicker. Now, he started a ferry here, and it became known as Vinegar Ferry, and the road that leads to where the ferry used to take off right behind me here became known as Vinegar Ferry Road. Now, Vinegar, it's not the word vinegar, it's basically what happened was his last name Winokur, when the local Pennsylvania Dutch people who were of German origin, when their accents fell on the word Winokur, over time it turned into vinegar. So that's why it's known as Vinegar Ferry, but it was actually Winokur's Ferry, Christian Winokur's Ferry. And my guess is there was a ferry here partially because there is this phyllite outcrop which runs the whole way across the river here. And in the episode that I described in the beginning, I actually made it about 3/4 of the way to the York County side, and that's where I went in the water over there. Now it's the water's low now. It's about 3 feet, 3.2 feet at the Harrisburg gauge. So when the water's low, you can walk right across here. It's actually quite nice and explore these rocks. But the water gets higher. If the water gets up to 4, 5, 6 feet, all this goes underwater. Now, obviously that ferry probably tried to operate year round as much as it could. So as it was going back and forth across this line here, sometimes the rocks would have been visible, sometimes the rocks weren't visible. I know ferries, sometimes they would anchor in their ropes that they used to pull the ferries. They would anchor them into rocks. So it might have been a good spot for a ferry for that reason. Christian Winokur died, and his son took over the business, and it ran, reportedly it went to the 1920s. It wasn't like the most popular ferry in this area, mainly because the York County side, that is that side over there, it's a very steep ascent up this ridge here, and you get up there, it actually goes straight to a vertical. That's Shoals Rock over there. So it wasn't that good of a ferry, because once you got off on the York County side, you either had to go upriver, or you had to walk downriver along the shore, or you had to go right up over that steep ridge there. So that kept it from ever becoming a heavily used ferry, maybe say like Wright's Ferry or Shanks Ferry, and some ferries downriver that were probably better in terms of being a business. But it ran from I guess the mid 1850s the whole way to the 1920s. So it had a nice long run as far as I'm concerned. And now it's a park. That's Riverfront Park in Lancaster, and the river trail runs right through this park, heading up towards Shocks Mill Bridge. I just saw a train go over that bridge, and this is where you will find this inscription. You can see that the water's has already dried it off. It's been really hot here in Pennsylvania. Today's not so bad, it's in the mid 80s, but you get out here on these rocks that have been heating up all day under the sun, and it still gets pretty hot. Another point of interest to make is that this ferry route, Vinegar Ferry, or Winokur's Ferry, was actually scouted during the Revolutionary War as a possible way to get troops across the Susquehanna River. But according to my research, it was deemed not a very good place, mainly because, again, the York County side, it goes almost straight up, a very steep ridge. So you could get the troops over there, but then, once they're there, they can't easily get to any other place. Let's pour some more water on it, see what happens, right? It's pretty cool. So what does the inscription mean itself? Well, here you see the arch, and you see the 2 1/2, and then underneath you have the LOL. Riverfront Park is located in Donegal Township. Now that will give you kind of a clue as to the connection that this might have in a historical sense. And I didn't figure this out. This was figured out by people basically on the internet. There's a person named June Lloyd who works at the York County Historical Society. Somebody sent her a picture of this inscription. She wrote a little article about it, and then some of the commenters threw in some ideas, and one of them actually figured out that this symbol, the 2 1/2, is actually very similar to a symbol used in Freemasonry called the Royal Arch Purple, which was a degree, in a high degree in Freemasonry. And the connection really is that there was an offshoot of the Freemasons called the Loyal Orange Order. Now, this order was founded in 1795, and it was named after William of Orange, who was one of the sons of George III of England, and I guess at one point he was one of the Grand Masters who presided over that lodge. So it was basically a Masonic type of organization that split off from, I guess, what you'd say is mainline Freemasonry. And it was popular in Scotland as well as Northern Ireland and also in the United States. And Donegal Township, Donegal Springs Presbyterian Church, these are all Scots-Irish kind of names. So what the theory is that this inscription, this Masonic rock art, whatever you want to call it, actually is a symbol for a lodge, or a symbol for the Royal Arch Purple, or a symbol for the Loyal Orange Order, right? The LOL could stand for Loyal Orange Lodge. So this could be a local lodge of that order decided to put an inscription here, and but for what? That's kind of what exactly, why is it here, I guess, is really the question that people are trying to answer. There's one theory that says that this rock, which is not part of the bedrock, this probably multi-ton diabase boulder, actually originally was located upriver about 1.5 miles, close to where the Shocks Mill Bridge goes across the river, heading up that way. There was some type of flood event in the 90s which transported it down here. Now, since it's not attached, since it's a free-floating piece of rock, it is possible that this was moved by the water itself. Now, I looked into the 90s floods, and there was, in fact, a flood, a rather large flooding event in 1996, which crested at about 25 feet. To put that in perspective, the record-breaking hurricane or tropical storm Agnes in 1972, it crested at 33 feet. I think that's based off the Harrisburg gauge. Now, as to whether a boulder this size can be moved by floodwaters like that I don't know. I know that, water has an enormous potential to move objects just from the weight of it. So I wouldn't be surprised if that turned out to be true. If this boulder actually originated up there, I don't know if we'll ever know that. I don't know if you ever find that out, because, I mean, is there any way to tell where this was? You'd have to find a historical record of somebody looking at the inscription when it was used to be up there. So now as to the date of when it was, I don't think they really know that either. They think it was probably sometimes in the 1800s, I would imagine. So you have an arch, you have 2.5, and you have LOL. Like we said earlier, LOL is believed to stand for Loyal Orange Lodge. So that would have been one of the lodges of the Loyal Orange Order, which did migrate here, or there was a branch of it here in the United States. The 2.5 refers to 2.5 tribes of Israel. It was the Gad, the Reuben, and the Manasseh. Half of Manasseh. So it was the Gad, the Reuben, and half of Manasseh tribes, which, according to the Bible, were responsible for leading the Jews across the River Jordan into the Promised Land. So to me, if you want to speculate as to why this is here, to me it seems pretty obvious that the biblical connection with the 2.5 makes the most sense. Instead of the River Jordan, you have the River Susquehanna, okay? And also, instead of some of the tribes of Israel leading the Jews across the River Jordan, you had Winokur leading people across the Susquehanna on his ferry to the Promised Land, which you would think of as the West, right? Right? Now, in the mid-1850s, York County had already been settled. The West wasn't necessarily in York County, it was actually farther west. But it's important to remember that before the West was the West, the East was the West, and the west coast of the Susquehanna River for a time represented the western frontier during the colonial days. So it makes sense to me that the owner of the ferry could have been a Mason, a Freemason, and he put this here, or maybe some of his lodge mates, or whatever you call them, put this here just as a symbolic gesture. The numbers themselves, I think they're less certain. People are less certain on that. The research I did was basically through June Lloyd. She was the historian who first talked about it, and also Adam Zern of Uncharted Lancaster. He wrote an article about it too. he seems to think that it was here, possibly because they would meet here. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, when the water's low, you can come out here. You could have a meeting of your Masonic group right out here, or maybe it was a clue leading the way to where their lodge was. Maybe in York County there was a lodge over there, some, you know, like an actual structure where they had their meetings. Or it could be what I think is just a purely symbolic thing, drawing parallels between a ferryman taking people over to what would have been, you know, back then, the west coast of the Susquehanna River, and then onward to the west, which was still, you know, in the mid 1800s, was still growing. Now the west would have been much farther into the country at that point, but people coming across, they had to cross this river if they wanted to get out there, right? Of course, they could have taken trains too at a certain point. So these numbers here could be referring possibly to a year. The Masons based their year off of the founding of the Knights Templar, which was in 1180 AD. So you take 1180 AD and you add however many years to that, and that would give you your year. I don't know if that actually works out in terms of what this number is. To me, it looks like 82180, so I'm not sure about that. And again, Royal Arch Purple. What did the purple mean? Why was it a purple? Why was it Royal Arch Purple and not Royal Arch Blue? Because apparently purple was the color of the cloth they used to cover the Ark of the Covenant. So Royal Arch Purple. That's where you get those three symbolic tie-ins there. So there it is, right there, on a big piece of diabase. And underneath here, okay, right here's the inscription right there. If you go down here to where the river level is, again, river's at like 3.2, 3.1 maybe now. This piece of diabase, wow, look at all these crawdaddies. Here you can really see it's independent of the bedrock, and underneath it is actually a giant spider. No, actually, the diabase boulder is sculpted out on the inside. So it's like a little shelter cave here, which is interesting, you know. And I naturally start to wonder, well, does it have anything to do? Maybe the lodge did have their meetings here. Maybe it was like an outdoor type of lodge, and they had their meetings in various outdoor locations. You can imagine, you know, a moonlit night here in the 1850s. They could make a little fire here and do their rituals or whatever they would do for their loyal Orange Order meetings. Now the order itself is still active, I think, over in Ireland and Scotland. It's not nearly as active now as it was then here in the United States. They did, at one point they owned an orphanage, which was then turned into a retirement home in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. That home was then bought out by a Methodist group, I'm not really sure, a church group. So who knows about the Loyal Orange Order? I don't know that much about it. If you're out there and you know about the Freemasons and all the splinter groups, leave some comments here and help me out here, because again, I know something about the Freemasons and the Knights Templar. I love the Knights Templar stuff, but the minutia of the Freemasons, there's all these splinter groups and arguments, and there's all these different levels, and you have these nested cellular type of organizational structure where the inner ring, you have the outer ring, the middle ring, and the inner ring. And the outer ring, which would be, you know, a beginner Freemason, does not know of the inner ring's existence, and each ring can have its purposes and its goals, and they're not always the same. I mean, you know, that's a deep rabbit hole that many people have gone down, and it's very interesting. So I think it's cool that there's a local tie-in here. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode, guys. I hope you guys had a great time. I know I did. I always love bringing everybody along with me on these adventures. This is a kind of more of a historic angle one, but very interesting nonetheless. Like I said, I'm interested in the Masons and the Knights Templar especially. So any kind of connection you have on a local level with historical elements like that, I think it's just really cool, right? So if you had a good time, make sure you hit subscribe, ring that bell for notifications, and follow me on all the platforms, okay? This is Brett, TopoRanger, signing out.